Galaxy, the universe, tried everything to make it work, but we can't stop. No, we can't stop the sky from falling. Galaxy, the universe, tried everything to make it work, but we can't stop. No, we can't stop the sky from falling.
DNA basics, okay? So understand the DNA, the basics. We're going to be going through a series of topics covering DNA, breaking it down to bite-sized pieces. And this is mainly what the series is going to consist of. Each topic will have its own video. So, of course, topic number 1 is what is DNA? And then we're going to continue with what is a cell, what is a gene, what are chromosomes, how many chromosomes do people have, what are Y chromosomes, what are X chromosomes, what are haplogroups, how are haplogroups named, what is the methodology behind the haplogroups nomenclatures, okay, what is autosomal DNA and how is it used, and what do ancestry DNA companies do with your DNA, and what can they tell you about your ancestry? Okay, so that may or may not be the last topic. We'll see along the way if anything else comes up that you want me to bring forth for you all. Okay, so topic number 1, what is DNA? So according to genome.gov, DNA, or deoxyribonucleic acid, is the hereditary material in humans and almost all other organisms. Nearly every cell in a person's body has the same DNA. Most DNA is located in the cell nucleus, where it is called nuclear DNA. So deoxyribonucleic acid, DNA, fact sheet. Okay, so DNA is a molecule that contains the biological instructions that make each species unique. DNA, along with the instructions it contains, is passed from adult organisms to their offspring during reproduction. Okay, and don't forget, I will be dropping the sources, the links to these sources in the chat. Sorry, not the chat. I may or may not do it in the chat. Okay, I take that back. I may or may not drop it in the chat. But for sure, they will be in the description. Okay. And so, according to Ask a Biologist, I believe that's Arizona State University EDU. This link will be in the description. The shape of DNA. Okay, so what is the shape of DNA? The most common DNA shape illustrated by artists and scientists looks a lot like a twisting ladder. Scientists call this a double helix. DNA also folds and coils itself into more complex shapes. The coiled shape makes it very small. In fact, it is small enough to easily fit inside any of our cells. This is a pretty amazing feat when you find out that the DNA from one cell, if unfolded, would stretch out to a length of 6 feet. Almost 2 meters. And so here on the right hand side, you see a graphic that is included on this website. Again, the link will be in the description. And you see it looks like a twisted ladder. They call this a double helix. All right. So how are DNA sequences used to make proteins? And this is according to genome.gov. DNA's instructions are used to make proteins in a 2-step process. First, enzymes read the information in a DNA molecule and transcribe it into an intermediary molecule called messenger ribonucleic acid, or mRNA. Next, the information contained in the mRNA molecule is translated into the language of amino acids, which are the building blocks of protein. This is a major task because there are 20 types of amino acids, which can be placed in many different orders to form a wide variety of proteins. All right. And so don't forget, I will be dropping these sources in the description. All right. So that's the end of my presentation. I'll go back over this. At the end, I'm going to play 2 videos. I'm going to go ahead and play 2 videos from YouTube to give you a visual aspect of this as well. 1 second here while it loads. Alrighty. What I'm waiting on is for the YouTube to respond to me. And then I'll go ahead and play it. Okay.
What is DNA? Every living thing has DNA, from plants to animals to bacteria, even to viruses which were once considered non-living. And most importantly, we humans have it. DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid, and although every living thing has DNA, its varied compositions differentiate you from others. The interesting fact is that humans' DNA is 99% the same. Therefore, it is only 1% of DNA that makes you unique. Does this mean twins don't have exactly the same DNA? No, they don't, unless they're monozygotic or identical twins. So now the questions arise. Why every living thing has DNA? What is so important in it? And what does it do? DNA has a recipe for synthesizing proteins. DNA synthesizes RNA, or ribonucleic acid, by a process called transcription. It is further translated into proteins by a process termed as translation. The explanation of DNA conversion into RNA, and finally RNA into proteins, is called central dogma. DNA contains hereditary information that is passed on to you from your parents. If you and your father have the same color of eyes, or your hair are as silky as your mother, it is because of DNA that you inherited from your parents. Even many diseases are passed on from generation to generation because of DNA. Where does DNA reside in your body? Your body is made up of billions and trillions of cells, and almost all cells have DNA in their nucleus. Can you tell us which cell may not contain DNA? Now let's talk about the structure of DNA. Think of DNA structure as a ladder whose rungs are made up of different bases and sides as sugar phosphate. Each composition of this nitrogenous base, pentose sugar, and phosphate group is called nucleotide. The nitrogenous bases are of 4 different types: adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine. Adenine will always bind with thymine, and cytosine with guanine. This type of bonding is hydrogen bonding. Phosphate and sugar are linked together to make backbone, and complementary bases are attached on it. Due to the bond angle of the sugar-phosphate molecules, the linkages will eventually form a double helix structure. There's a lot more to know about DNA, but that's all for now.
It's just beautiful, isn't it? It's mesmerizing. It's double helix sighting. You really can tell just by looking at it how sort of important and amazing it is. It's pretty much the most complicated molecule that exists, and potentially the most important one. It's so complex that we didn't even know for sure what it looked like until about 60 years ago. And so multifariously awesome that if you took all of it from just one of our cells and untangled it, it would be taller than me. Now consider that there are probably 50 trillion cells in my body right now. Laid end to end, the DNA in those cells would stretch to the sun not once, but 600 times. Mind blown yet? Hey, you want to make one? Of course, you know, I'm talking about deoxyribonucleic acid, known to its friends as DNA. DNA is what stores our genetic instructions, the information that programs all of our cells' activities. It's a 6 billion letter code that provides the assembly instructions for everything that you are. And it does the same thing for pretty much every other living thing. I'm gonna go out on a limb here and assume that you are a human, in which case every body cell that you have, or somatic cell in you, has 46 chromosomes, each containing one big DNA molecule. These chromosomes are packed together tightly with proteins in the nucleus of the cell. DNA is nucleic acid, and so is its cousin, which we'll also be talking about, ribonucleic acid, or RNA. Now, if you can make your mind do this, remember all the way back to episode 3, where we talked about all the important biological molecules, carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins. That ring a bell? Well, nucleic acids are the fourth major group of biological molecules, and for my money, they have the most complicated job of all. Structurally, they're polymers, which means that each one is made up of many small repeating molecular units. In DNA, these small units are called nucleotides. Link them together and you have yourself a polynucleotide. Now, before we actually put these tiny parts together to build a DNA molecule like some microscopic piece of IKEA furniture, let's first take a look at what makes up each nucleotide. We're gonna need 3 things. 1, a 5-carbon sugar molecule, 2, a phosphate group, and 3, one of 4 nitrogen bases. DNA gets the first part of its name from our first ingredient, the sugar molecule, which is called deoxyribose. But all the really significant stuff, the genetic coding that makes you you, is found among the 4 nitrogenous bases: adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine. It's important to note that in living organisms, DNA doesn't exist as a single polynucleotide molecule, but rather a pair of molecules that are held tightly together. They're like an intertwined microscopic double spiral staircase, basically just a ladder, but twisted, the famous double helix. And like any good structure, we have to have a main support. In DNA, the sugars and phosphates bond together to form twin backbones. These sugar-phosphate bonds run down each side of the helix, but chemically in opposite directions. In other words, if you look at each of the sugar-phosphate backbones, you'll see that one appears to be upside down in relation to the other. One strand begins at the top of the first phosphate, connected to the sugar molecule's 5th carbon, and then ending where the next phosphate would go with the
So the reason I'm sharing this video is because it's not only going to tell you the basics of DNA, it's going to go a little bit more in depth, but also not overloading you too much with the structure of DNA and how it replicates. And then I'll go back over my little PowerPoint presentation, do it full screen because I'm not sure. I don't think it went full screen the first time, so I'll just go briefly over that. And I'll pause here and there during the video.
free end at the sugar's 3rd carbon. This creates a pattern called 5' and 3'. I've always thought the deoxyribose with an arrow, with the oxygen as a point. It always points from 3' to 5'. Now on the other strand, it's exactly the opposite. It begins up top with a free end at the sugar's 3rd carbon, and then the phosphates connect to the sugar's 5th carbons all the way down. And it ends at the bottom with the phosphate, and you've probably figured this out already, but this is called the 3' to 5' direction. Now it is time to make ourselves one of these famous double helices. These 2 long chains are linked together by the nitrogenous bases via relatively weak hydrogen bonds. But they can't be just any pair of nitrogenous bases. Thankfully, when it comes to figuring out what part goes where, all you have to do is remember that if one nucleotide has an adenine base, only thymine can be its counterpart. Likewise, guanine can only bond with cytosine. These bonded nitrogenous bases are called base pairs. The GC pairing has 3 hydrogen bonds, making it slightly stronger than the AT base pair, which only has 2. It's the order of these 4 nucleobases, or the base sequence, that allows your DNA to create you. So AGGTCCAT.
So, family, we're not going to need to know, the basic pairs and stuff like that of the DNA, but it is good to know just in general um, how DNA actually works, right? How it's made, what's the base sequences, etc. So, for our, haplogroup studies, we're not going to need to know that, but it is just good information to know. All right.
TG means something completely different as a base sequence than, say, TTCAGTCG. Human chromosome 1, the largest of all of our chromosomes, contains a single molecule of DNA with 247 million base pairs. If you printed all of the letters of chromosome 1 into a book, it would be about 200,000 pages long. And each of your somatic cells has 46 DNA molecules tightly packed into its nucleus. That's one for each of your chromosomes. Put all 46 molecules together, and we're talking about roughly 6 billion base pairs in every cell. This is the longest book that I've ever read. It's about 1,000 pages long. If we were to fill it with our DNA sequence, we'd need about 10,000 of them to fit our entire genome. Pop quiz. Let's test your skills using a very short strand of DNA. I'll give you one base sequence. You give me the base sequence that appears on the other strand. Okay, here goes. So we got a 5' AGGTCCG to 3', and time's up. The answer is 3' TCCAGGC 5'.
Again,
See
not
how it works? It's
relevant
not
for
super
our
complicated.
current
Since each
studies, but good
nitrogenous
to know.
base only has one counterpart, you can use one base sequence to predict what its matching sequence is going to look like. So, could I make the same base sequence with a strand of that other nucleic acid, RNA? No, you could not. RNA is certainly similar to its cousin DNA. It has a sugar phosphate backbone with nucleotide bases attached to it, but there are 3 major differences. 1, RNA is a single-stranded molecule, no double helix here. 2, the sugar in RNA is ribose, which has one more oxygen atom than deoxyribose, hence the whole starting with an R instead of a D thing. And finally, RNA does not contain thymine. Its 4th nucleotide is the base uracil, so it bonds with adenine instead. RNA is super important to the production of our proteins, and you'll see later that it has a crucial role in the replication of DNA. But first, biographies! Yes, plural this week, because when you start talking about something as multitudinously awesome and elegant as DNA, you have to wonder just who figured all this stuff out and how big was their brain? Well, unsurprisingly, it actually took a lot of different brains in a lot of different countries and nearly 100 years of thinking to do it. The names you usually hear when someone asks who discovered DNA are James Watson and Francis Crick, but that's bunk. They did not discover DNA, nor did they discover that DNA contained genetic information. DNA itself was discovered in 1869 by a Swiss biologist named Friedrich Miescher. His deal was studying white blood cells, and he got those white blood cells in the most horrible way you could possibly imagine from collecting.
All right, family. So I'm not going to play the whole entire video, but again, the link to that will be in the description, so you can watch the full entire video if you want to. I'm going to go over briefly that little presentation that I did, just so you can see the common denominator between the basics of DNA, right? 1 second. Why is this? Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and share this little presentation again. Okay. Let me make sure this is full screen. All right, good. All right. So again, what is DNA? According to genome.gov, DNA is the hereditary material in humans and almost all other organisms. Nearly every cell in the human's body has the same DNA. Most DNA is located in the cell's nucleus, okay, which is called nuclear DNA. Okay, so DNA is a molecule that contains the biological instructions that make each species unique. DNA, along with the instructions it contains, is passed from adult organisms to their offspring during reproduction. And so we already went over the shape, and you saw that in the video, how that was in both videos, how the shape of DNA is illustrated as a twisting ladder, or also known as a double helix. And this source will be linked in the description. All right. And in the crash course video, you understood the base pairs of DNA, okay, and their function, and the DNA's sequencing function. All right, and you understood a little bit of messenger RNA, and this source will also be linked in the chat. I keep saying in the chat because I'm used to doing live videos, so I'm pre-recording this now because I have some other things I need to do. So if I say in the chat in this video, until I get accustomed to pre-recording these, just know the links will be in the description. All right, and it's really brief. Like I said, I don't want to overload you with information. I don't want to overload you with information. I want to keep these kind of short and simple because we are going to be going into a lot of information. All right. Don't forget to like this. Don't forget to share this. I will be creating a playlist just like I did the Research Basics series. Okay. And I'll link that series in the description as well. I'm going to go ahead and play an outro song for us.
Galaxies and universe tried everything to make it work, but we can't stop. No, we can't stop the sky from falling. Galaxies and universe tried everything to make it work, but we can't stop. No, we can't stop the sky from falling.